on as the longest standing county board member in the state of Illinois, 44, 45 years as well. So I just wanted to reminisce a little bit this morning about that. Recently I was reflecting on my experiences and took a walk down the hall here outside the room and looked at the group pictures and reminisced about all the different people that have made up this. If you get a chance today when you leave, if you just turn left and go out here, you can take a look at about 46 years worth of people that have actually put their time in and have contributed and served this county well over the years. When I looked at it, I thought, what a great company of dedicated men and women we've had and all that's been accomplished. There's always been a certain amount of pride, camaraderie with this group and respect. Regardless of the side of an issue one might have been on, many have gone on before us now, and there's a few that are still around and involved in the community in various manners, and I'd like to mention a few this morning. Some that I'll never forget. Obviously, some are more forgettable, not forgettable than others. There was Tommy Tompkins from State Farm, one of the oldest members ever, Bill Lawrence and Delmer Stride and Scott Brand and Gene Souch and Jack Moran. You may know some of these people, and I'm sure I'm going to miss some names as I go through this as well, just writing down people that I served with or knew well. There was my old 1984 Health Committee, made up of members Dr. Buford H. Duffy Bass, former NFL player Bob Bull Newman, Chet Wilson from the bank, Lee Short from Westland's admissions office, Wayne Holmes from the park, and there was Jerry Reynolds and Steve Hazelton and Dwayne Moss and John Butler, who did the greatest invocations, and Kathy Ahart and Ben Owens and Terry Renner and former Sheriff Walt Clark and Joe Summer and Patricia Wambacher and a rookie named Adam Kinzinger was with us for a while. Two great country gentlemen who were my friends, Evan Evans and Dale Dean, who originally encouraged me to run for this board. Then there was John Wenham, former IW political science professor, who has moved to Wisconsin and is still serving as an active county board member up in Wisconsin. My old jogging partner, John Stevens, who we lost way too early in life, rest his soul, and my old office partner and business colleague, former Chairman Gary Riss, along with former Chairman Mike Sweeney and Matt Sorensen. And of course, there was former Chairman Nancy Froelich, a great leader, and her vice chair at that time was Paul Segoviano. As many former members still around, like Barbara Stewart, who we see often, Tom Whalen, my old football coach Chuck Armitage, Betty Ruskowska, Sally Pine is here today, Victoria Harris is here today, Diane Bostic, Ann Harding, Alan Ware, Sonny O'Connor, our buddy, former Mayor Rich Buchanan, and many more members, and I'm sure I've mentioned some, and I have forgot to mention some today, that I was proud to have known and served with. We just lost former Coroner Bill Anderson, and of course our old friend, the legendary Mr. Stan Hazelton. I can only imagine how much fun Stan would have had with new members, Scritchlow and Baird, I think, and I would have seen that they were on his committee as well. And many more. Well, I got to quit rambling here, so I guess let's see if anybody else I missed here. I guess it's time for us to call this meeting to order. So welcome everyone to this Tuesday, January 16th, 2018 monthly full meeting of the County Board. For our invocation today, I signed up for the duty. So as we start out this new year, I'd like for you to join me, and I'm sorry if some of you don't have a reading back there. Together in reading a prayerful verse which recently read at Dr. Charles Harris's memorial service and that you have in front of you. And so if we could all rise and stand and pray and pay tribute to our former members of the Mclean County Board and their families. Find my sheet. Thank you. In the rising of the sun and its going down, we remember them. In the blowing of the wind, chill, we remember them. In the opening of buds and the rebirth of spring, we remember them. In the blueness of the sky and the warmth of the summer, we remember them. In the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember them. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember them. When we are weary and need of strength, we remember them. When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember them. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember them. So long as we live, they too shall live, for they are now a part of us as we remember them. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Clerk, please call the roll.
William Caseley. Present. Don Cavallini. Absent. Chuck Erickson.
Here.
George Gordon.
Here.
Mark Johnson.
Here.
Randall Martin.
Here.
Catherine Metzger. Present. Scott Murphy.
Here.
Eric Rankin.
Present.
Carla Robustelli.
Present.
Susan Schaefer.
Here.
Ryan Scritchlow.
Here.
Paul Segobiano.
Here.
David Seltzer.
Here.
James Solner.
Here.
George Wendt.
Present by phone.
Lori Woolrab.
Here.
Josh Barnett.
Present.
Jacob Beard.
Present.
John McIntyre.
Here. We have 19 members present, I believe, or 18 members present. And with Mr. Wendt would be 19 as well. Pursuant to Section 2020C2A of the Mclean County Code, Member Wendt has requested to attend and participate in this meeting remotely. Proper notice was received in accordance with our board rules. Is there any objection to Member Wendt attending and participating remotely? If none, then it would take a 2/3 vote to deny him of the right to attend. With no objection, I deem his request to attend and participate remotely approved. Thank you and welcome, Mr. Wendt.
Thank you.
We have 3 members of the public to appear this morning. And so first of all, I'd like to have Ms. Sharon Hellman come to the podium. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Good morning. My name is Sharon Hellman. I lived in the county for 22 years and now 8 years in the city of Bloomington. We recycle and compost at our house, and we try to be very mindful of the consumer goods that we bring into our house and especially the packaging that they're in. I believe this is a good plan. It was developed over a period of 2 years. It has a lot of data and analysis in it, and it had much input from other people who are experts in the field. I like the hierarchy of disposal of solid waste listed on this page, and I like the time increments in which it can be implemented. I thought that was a very thoughtful plan. This environment that we have in Mclean County is the only one we have. There is no plan B. This is it, plan A, for our county, our state, our country, and our world. We must keep improving it. I believe that all people, including businesses and landlords of apartment houses and apartment complex, must be stakeholders in this. I urge you strongly to adopt this plan in its original form. We need a strategic plan for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Ms. Elizabeth Johnston.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth Johnston. I live in District 5. Since the Land Use Committee, when the amendments were introduced and passed, there have been discussions about the plan and about the amended version. It has been discussed that the original plan was a feel-good plan created by so-called experts without valid credentials, and that citizens need to take more personal responsibility. And then more importantly, we need to look at the realities of what we're facing. The realities that we're facing have been outlined pretty well in the original plan. On page 10, you can see that the declining capacity of the landfill has been monitored for several years. And this is one of the original factors driving the decision to create a 20-year plan instead of a 5-year plan. On page 20, they highlight that in the long term, cost avoidance will be key, as fuel and labor costs for exporting waste to externally located landfills will eventually increase due to external economic forces, even if not in the short term. On page 22, they address the concerns about the potential ordinances. And they make sure that they understand that the main barrier to recycling for C&D is cost. And so some of the ordinances that have been written around the state have taken that into consideration. They have safety valves. But basically what they want to highlight is that across the communities, people are able to write ordinances in the best needs of the community. And so the fact that it is a proposed potential ordinance, this is something that, it's not something that is automatic, and that is something the community needs to be aware of. This is something that is a last resort. It is going to appeal to people's responsible natures to do the right thing through education. It was also addressed that the plan was created by people who were not experts. And when I looked through the list at the end of the report, I saw that there were 9 members from our universities with degrees in sustainability and environmental health. There were 5 members from companies who actually deal with waste management and recovery, and 6 members from various levels of government in the community. And this is just the people that were listed. There were many more people that were consulted in the creation of this plan. And if the objection statements are to be taken at face value, that people are concerned about being coerced into recycling, let us keep in mind that the option for ordinance is something mentioned as a backup tool to consider if the voluntary program is not successful, and that each of these options for ordinance will be left up to the individual community. This is not something that's going to be implemented countywide, so each community will get to choose their own. In closing, I want to address the concerns about some of the rural counties. And I did pull, in District 5, there is one county, and I'll just read the opening line to close up. This is from their waste recycling website. Keeping the community clean and green is the role and responsibility of both the village and its residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Our third speaker this morning is Mr. David Parker.
Thank you. Change is inevitable. Change happens, not only in our own personal lives, but change in the overall life of a community as well. McLean County is changing and will continue to change and evolve over time. Changes in the type of people who make up this community, changes in how we define who we are as a community. Not only the inevitable age demographics that come with any community, but being a college community and a home to the young professionals who move here for jobs at State Farm lends this area to a faster rate of change than most. But this is nothing to be afraid of. Progress is good, although at times uncomfortable. So I ask the members of this board to be mindful of the changing community and to allow their votes to be relevant to the character of McLean County as it exists in 2018. Let's use the proposed 20-year solid waste and recycling plan as an example. The citizens of McLean County in the year 2018 care deeply about issues such as recycling, sustainability, and the environment. That's who we are as a community. It's for this reason that over 2,300 signatures were collected on petitions to support the plan as originally written. It's for this reason that 100% of participants during the 90-day public comment period supported the plan as originally written. It's for this reason that numerous letters to the editor have been submitted to our local news publications in support of the plan as originally written. It's possible that some people don't support the plan, but if so, they didn't speak up. The 90-day public comment period, letters to the editor, all these methods of communication were available to all citizens of McLean County. And yet the fact remains that by all benchmarks used to measure public support, the people of McLean County overwhelmingly spoke out in support of this plan as originally written. And yet we find ourselves here today shy of a unanimous vote. So I again implore the members of this board to be mindful of the changing character of McLean County. The many years of combined experience on this board are a true asset to this county. But if that experience comes at the cost of no longer having accurate representation in our community, then the natural course of democracy will inevitably right that wrong in future elections at the unfortunate price of losing all the valuable experience that we have on the board. We don't want that. It's not too late to adapt. We simply ask that you vote with the will of the people, to live out the creed of the word represent in the term representative, to put aside personal philosophies and think of the 17,000 people average who have lended you their voice. Age is irrelevant. Whether you have a D or an R next to your name on the ballot is irrelevant. The only thing that is relevant is whether you have the ability to adapt and look honestly at the type of citizens who live in McLean County in the year 2018, to look at the type of community that we are, and to vote accordingly. Not to vote for a McLean County that was, but to vote for a McLean County that is. And this community supports the 20-year solid waste and recycling plan as it was originally written. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to the number 6 consent agenda. Is there a
Move
motion?
be approved as presented.
Motion by member Segoviano, second by member Kaisley. All in favor of the consent agenda as presented, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? I'd like to refer to page 35 for briefly. There is a transfer ordinance there. You may want to check it out real quick if you haven't already. Is there anyone that objects to it? It requires 2/3 vote. If there are no objections at this time, or anybody that wants their vote recorded, then the motion will pass unanimously to approve the consent agenda. We will move on then to resolutions, and there is one resolution, and it is on page 70. As part of the Illinois Bicentennial celebration, they are asking commemorations for different of our citizens, men and women who actually participated, in some case lost their lives in some of our conflicts over the years. And so there is a proclamation for those people that participated in World War I, and I will read it for you at this time. Whereas 100 years ago, the United States of America entered into the catastrophic event known as the Great War, which was to impact and change the lives of all the residents of McLean County. And whereas we should acknowledge all of the citizens of McLean County who dedicated themselves tirelessly to providing support for the war effort by conserving here at home, providing hundreds of thousands of articles to the troops overseas, providing a large amount of farm crops, and by raising millions of dollars to support the war efforts. And whereas many McLean County citizens served in roles other than soldier, including a large number of leading physicians, surgeons, and nursing on the battlefields, in the camps, and in hospitals, as well as many other citizens who served through the YMCA, the Red Cross, and other humanitarian fields. And whereas it is right and proper that we recognize that over 2,500 100 men from McLean County who volunteered and joined the armed services on their own volition, and the additional 2,500 young men who were selected to serve through the operation of the draft law. And whereas we must never forget the more than 150 men who made the supreme sacrifice and gave their lives for McLean County and our country, and whereas by honoring those who fought and gave their lives 100 years ago, we honor all those from McLean County who have ever served their country, and let them know that we truly appreciate their service and we will never forget. And now, therefore, it be resolved that the McLean County Board declare April 2018 the month to officially commemorate the Great War, and calls on veterans groups, churches, schools, clubs and organizations, newspapers, media outlets, and residents of the county to set aside time during this period to recognize and honor all of those who served and commemorate all those that made the ultimate sacrifice adopted by the McLean County Board this 16th day of January 2018. Thank you. We'll move on to the reports of the standing committees at this time. Executive Committee, Vice Chair Soler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Executive Committee has two items for action this morning. The first one is 7A1A, request approval of a memorandum of understanding for economic development consulting services. I so moved.
Motion by Vice Chair Solner. Is there a second? Second by Member Selzer. Comments or questions or discussions? Member Segoviano.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Wow. I think it's only appropriate this time as we deliberate, I guess, or vote on this. So thank my colleague here, Chuck Erickson. Chuck and I, several months ago, brought this issue up in regards to the Economic Development Council so that we could better address what this money is being spent for as a citizen of McLean County asked questions. And so there was quite a bit of deliberation in the Executive Committee in regards to this. And so now we're finally getting some action, and it was very simple. We just wanted to know, you want the money, what are you going to do with it? Tell us, what the results have been, and then give us a report on it. In reading in the paragraph here just recently, I see our friends to the north of us, the town of Normal, has taken some action, but they did it in one simple paragraph. You want the money, tell us what you're going to do with it, and give us the results. So it's a step in the right direction, and I would hope that, we use this philosophy for any and all organizations to come to this board for taxpayers' money. Tell us what you want it for, tell us what you're doing with this, and give us the results and a payment. And once again, I thank Chuck for his cooperation in this matter.
Member Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Member Segoviano. I appreciated that. When we started this, we did try to reach across party lines, and we did try to find consensus to see where we could get a group of people together who would go along with this. I've always been a firm believer in protecting the record. I mean, what is said at a meeting has meaning and should always be memorialized. It's all you have 10 years from now. The record should be sacrosanct. On July 12th, at a CDAP committee meeting, the record does reflect this. Mr. Erickson believes that there seems to be a consensus that we should create a memorandum of understanding on how the EDC should report to the county. If then the reports are not sufficient, we then withdraw the funding. This gives the EDC a chance to justify themselves. And the reason I said that at that meeting, because I knew there was some discussion amongst some of the members about withdrawing the funding, and I didn't feel at that appropriate time that was the appropriate approach. I felt that the better approach was to give the EDC an opportunity to explain itself. And so that's why I pushed hard with Member Segoviano to try to get a memorandum of understanding so we could try to see where we can work together. I'm cognizant of the EDC's concerns about confidentiality, but I do hope they understand, as Member Segoviano pointed out to me often, I mean, if a constituent comes up to you and says, how does the EDC spend their money? I can say, ask this member or go look on their website, but I would like to be able to point to reports that we have in our record. And so that's why I pushed for that. To my amazement, then in September at an executive committee meeting, I asked, where are we standing on the MOU? And I got a blank stare from administration. And so, and I didn't understand that because I definitely had brought it up at the CDAP committee. So I pushed forward and I kept my persistence. And, you know, with the help of other members who encouraged me to keep going forward, I did keep my persistence. And ultimately, we were able to get a memorandum of understanding, which I think at this point in time is fair to the EDC and fair to us. But I do point out that the point of the memorandum is to be for only 1 year. And so if changes need to be made in the second year, the county board has the right to do that. This present memorandum of understanding isn't written in stone. It is for 1 year, I guess, but it's not written in stone, and it's not written in stone for the next year. So if members have suggestions or comments about changes they would like to see to the memorandum, I would encourage them to approach members of the executive committee to address those. I look forward to our partnership with the EDC, and I look forward to working with the EDC in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there further comments or discussion? Member Sulzer.
Just want to appreciate what Member Erickson said and Member Segoviano, and also would like to point out, though, that our this is a memorandum to codify those things that we've been doing, and just thank the EDC for what they've done as we look back on just the most recent past successes and some of the stuff in the pipeline. So I'm very proud to be that this memorandum is put together and that the work they're doing continues. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments? Member Solder?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make sure the EDC and the general public, I guess, understand that this isn't a reflection on their work. I think they've done a great job. They continue to bring businesses to the county and try to keep businesses here. And so I'd like to think that they understand our position. I'm a big supporter. I'm supporting full funding in the future. Again, it's just it all is contingent on the reporting they do back to us. So I think they've done a great job. I just want to make sure people are aware of that.
Thank you. Further comments? Member Woolrab.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really have a couple of technical questions and maybe a comment to follow up. On page 74 under performance measures, let me add that I certainly do appreciate the EDC and also this memorandum as well. I think, this will hopefully have both of us working better together. But on page 74 under performance measures, the first bullet point says written report, we're expecting a written report bi-monthly to the county board chair. And I looked up the term bi-monthly because I couldn't remember exactly which one it was, but the definition I got was it could be either twice a month or every other month, and I'm kind of hoping that we're looking at every other month rather than asking, and I could be wrong about that definition, but asking them to write 2 reports a month. Can anybody clarify that for me, please?
Opinion of the chair, and I think reflected upon the conversation and the debate at the committee meeting that this was considered to be every other month.
Then, thank you very much. I don't know if that needs to be clarified in writing. Okay. Then on the third bullet point, we're asking them to provide us with an analysis in sufficient detail to appraise the county board of funds received from the county have been allocated and dispersed. And I guess I'm just kind of wondering, I'm trying to envision, given that there's so many entities involved in contributing to the EDC, exactly how we expect them to separate out our monies in their endeavors from the other monies, what that would look like. And I wonder if somebody could clarify that for me.
I don't have an answer for that. I'm not sure you can clarify it for me either, Ms. Woolrab. Staff?
You're correct in that they have a wide range of expenditures and also a large number of investors. Our belief is that it would ultimately be on a percentage basis based upon the contributions that are provided by the county.
Further comments?
One additional comment there that I guess in the end, there's a few places where you have performance measures. I hope that ultimately we judge their performance by how many business they've been able to bring to the community and how many they've been able to retain, rather than on whether a report has been generated exactly in the perfect timing or not. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Casey, I believe you were next.
It seems to me that this is a proper resolution of our relationship with the EDC, but I would like to comment in response to the Pantagraph's article on this the other day that said that this was in response to our mistrust in the EDC, and I think that is not a proper characterization of this board and its position. I think that we just want to improve communications, but I don't think that there has been any mistrust by the board directed at the EDC. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Casey. I would agree with you and diddle that comment as well. Member Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In addressing the performance measure in regards to what the report would look like, I don't think that any member had any exact idea what the reports are going to look like. I mean, we were going to do this for a trial period for a year and see what they look like. And then when we go back into the budget process next year, if we decide that the reports are excellent, maybe we rewrite that language. Or if we decide that we need more in the reports, we rewrite the language. But this really is kind of a let's see what they do first. Let's let them produce what they can produce to us, and let's give them a fair opportunity to present, what they do. And that's all we were trying to do. And it's meant to be it's meant to promote fairness and transparency, and it had no other purpose.
Thank you. I want the board to know that being a member of the EDC board as well, I am committed to working with the EDC and providing what it would take to be a liaison, the information that this board is requiring. I will communicate any desires back to them. We'll clarify this as we move along every other month as well. Member Segoviano.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hopefully, in conclusion, there have been words of appreciation for what the EDC does, and I think we all join in the effort that they provide to McLean County. But I think also in the words of praise, we sometimes overlook those people who have the authority, the taxing authority, to make all these efforts possible. And I know, and I'll use the Brandt situation for example, our chairman and our administrative staff spent hours upon hours of trying to make this possible. And then we look at the school districts in the town of Normal, the city of Bloomington, who have to sign off on some of these tax abatements. So there's a lot of work that goes on besides what EDC does. I'm not minimizing what they do, but sometimes we need to extend that olive branch to all of our elected officials who make it possible also. Without having their authority to abate these taxes, these things would not happen. So when we pass out accolades, I think we need to sometimes look at home and see what our staff is doing, as well as Bloomington Normal and the school district. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions? Member Rankin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the questions that I had at the executive committee, there was a previous line in there that was, I think that we eventually removed, was trying to, on the performance measure side, to make your two timelines meet. I'm curious as to what the committee would think. Instead of the written report being bi-monthly, can it not be moved to quarterly? That way it coincides with the presentation then that would be made to the executive committee. It would only make sense to me is that why would they present something that they did every 2 months, but then they present on it, then they come to the board and talk to us about it in the third month? It seemed that we would have a lagging amount of information. I would, as a member of the executive committee, I'd like to have the most up-to-date data, and it would make sense that that would be on a quarterly basis rather than on a 2-month, because you have a 2-month report and then a 3-month presentation. Does that make sense in terms of what I'm saying? Maybe Member Erickson has a better idea here.
Yeah, thank you, Member Rankin. I believe, though, what we were trying to do, and I'll stand corrected if I'm wrong here, was that the presentations were to be more about the budget and how they were spending our money, whereas the bi-monthly report was to give us information about ongoing projects. And so we were apprised of what was going on with regards to ongoing projects as they were working on them, not finding out, as some people felt when we found out about the Brant project, at the last second. Once again, as we discussed at executive, though, you still run into confidentiality issues, and I don't propose to know how to solve them. I don't have even the slightest clue. But I suppose as we go along, we'll figure it out. I think that's all we can do. But I think the point of the bi-monthly or every other month was to try to get some idea what projects they were working on, as opposed to the other presentation was just tell us about your budget. I think that's the difference. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think that's what we were trying to do.
Member Rankin, with your permission, might suggest that we deal with this in exec and provide any amendment to the MOU at our next meeting, and we can revisit that discussion that we had before on that, if that's fine with you. Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? If none, all in favor of the MOU as presented at this time, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Aye. Motion is carried. Member Solner, the floor is back to you.
Thank you. Next item is 7A1B, request approval of an emergency appropriation ordinance amending the McLean County fiscal year 2018 combined annual appropriation and budget ordinance, General Fund 001, County Board 001, and it deals with the VRI. I so move.
Motion by Vice Chair Solner. Is there a second? Second by Member Gordon. Comments or questions? This requires a 2/3 vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The same. Is there anyone dissenting? If not, the motion is carried.
That's all we have for action items. There are a number of reports, and I'd be glad you can look at our unapproved minutes on page 2 and 9 for any other information. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to item B, Justice Committee Report. Chair Member Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Justice Committee brings one item for action to the County Board this morning. Item B1A, request approval of the renewal of a contract for consulting services for the McLean County Criminal Justice Coordinating Council with Illinois State University, found on pages 104 through 108, and I'll move that.
Motion by Member Gordon, second by Member Martin. Comments or questions? Member Murphy. Member Murphy abstains from voting on this item. And Member Rankin as well. Please have that recorded. Anyone else? Any comments or questions? If none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Aye. Motion has carried.
Our general report can be found in the unapproved minutes, pages 43 through 48, and I'll be happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to the Finance Committee. Chair Member Selzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We bring one item for action. It's a request approval of a resolution authorizing the County Board Chairman to enter into a property tax settlement agreement, and I would move that.
Motion by Chairman Selzer, second by Member Solner. Comments or questions? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried.
Our general report's in the package, and I'll be happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Thank you. We'll move on to the report of the Health Committee. Chair Member Schaefer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Health Committee brings two items for action today. 7D1A is request approval and ordinance of McLean County Board amending the 2017 combined appropriation budget ordinance for Fund 107, and I so move.
Motion by Chairman Schaefer, second by Member Segoviano. Comments or questions? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried.
7D1B is request approval for an emergency appropriation ordinance amending the McLean County fiscal year 2017 combined annual appropriation and budget ordinance for Fund 110, and I so move.
Motion by Member Schaefer, second by Member Wolrab. Comments or questions? This requires a 2/3 vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Are there any dissenting votes? If none, motion is carried.
Our general report can be found in the unapproved minutes packets on pages 16 through 24.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to the Land Use and Development Committee. Chair Member Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring item 7E1A of the Land Use and Development Committee, 20-year materials recovery and resource management plan for McLean County. Bloomington and Normal, Illinois, from the Ecology Action Center, and I so move.
Motion by Member Erickson, second by Member Scritchlow. Comments or questions? Member Segoviano.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I'd like to make a substitute motion. I would like to approve the 20-year solid waste management plan that was presented by the Ecology Action Center.
There's been a substitute motion on the floor by Member Segoviano. Is there a second? Member Barnett, seconds. Comments or questions or discussion on a substitute motion? This would be to return to the originally presented plan presented by the Ecology Action Center without the amendments.
That's true, Mr. Chairman, and if I may, there's been a lot said in regards to some revisions have been made, but that original plan came to us with a lot of time, effort, and energy, and by a lot of professionals. And I think, you know, there's been some terminology applied to this that is really not true. In fact, I think we all received a letter from McLean County Chamber of Commerce, and in this letter, they refer to this as an ordinance. It is not an ordinance. It's simply a plan. You know, that we are adopting a plan that can be revised throughout. In fact, I think we've had one for about 20 years, a plan. But, you know, as we move from 2017 into 2018 and continue into the 21st century, we've done that through the years and months of planning. Planning. And that's what this is all about. Planning for the future, you know. And many, I'm the only one here I know that we go back in history and we try to cite a landfill in Randolph Township. And because it was the soon demise of the current landfill, that's when recycling kicked in and we were able to extend the life of that landfill. I think we're probably close to closing that within a month or a couple months, and we're paying like $50 a ton to transport our garbage to Livingston County. The more that we can keep off those trucks and out of Livingston County, the more it's going to benefit the citizens of McLean County. I think the efforts that was put into this planning will go a long ways into the future as to where we will be as a county in regards to our solid waste. And I would hope this board would realize that and pass it, understanding that everybody has their own take on this. But as we call this, and it is presented to us as a plan, it's not a resolution, it's not a binding law, is simply a plan. And if I could conclude, I had the privilege of co-chairing McLean County 20-year study program a few years back. I was also selected by the city of Bloomington to do a 20-year study plan. And I think Mr. Watson can verify that some of those plans are still sitting on the shelf. Some of them have been implemented. But they were plans that can be worked on to enhance the lives of the citizens of McLean County. And I hope they will support this substitute motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Segoviano. That's your first of round one in case we have a long debate here. Member Scritchlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to say thank you to all my fellow board members for taking so much time and representing their constituents on this issue, as I'm sure it gobbled up a fair quantity of your time here recently. While we each have different views on the implementation of the solid waste plan, I believe that everyone here is acting as a voice for their community. We're all very passionate about what we believe in, and we stand up for what we believe in. I believe the difference between the plan as came out of land use as opposed to the amendment this morning is the amendment this morning removes the use of educational programs as it relates to C&D recycling, and in place calls directly for an ordinance. It also allows for taxpayer dollars to be used to lobby for ordinances, and by supporting the amendment to put it back to original, you're going on the record in favor for the use of ordinances in this plan. I'm in an interesting spot as I have been trusted by all of you, my fellow board members, to represent my constituents and make their voices heard. I'm doing my very best. No matter the outcome today, I'm confident that the community will be a better place because of a board that will work together and open to ideas that will allow us to all prosper together. In closing, I ask that you cast your vote today for what you are willing to implement tomorrow.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Member Solder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In my mind, this is the most controversial issue I voted on in my tenure on the board, and maybe the hardest. First, I'd like to apologize to Member Scritchlow. Ryan, when we first met to discuss this plan and your desire to propose your amendments, I said to do what you believe is right, and it will all work out. I had no idea you would be hassled and berated and your reputation called into question. We all have professions and interests that conflict with items that come to this body. My interest is because I live in Ellsworth and we have the responsibility to recycle on our own. I believe an ordinance to compel me to recycle more extensively will cost me money. That's my special interest. Although we members represent the entire county, I was elected by the citizens of District 2. After speaking to Lions Club members, Legion members, community leaders, farmers, and elected officials in my district, I believe that they desire me to vote for the plan that was amended by Member Scritchlow. Other than wind farm permitting, no other issues has led to more discussion by my constituents. And overwhelmingly, they aren't concerned that the previous plan would encourage municipalities and this body to force recycling with the public paying for it. I call that an unfunded mandate. I think we were generally against that. I can see there's been much public collaboration on the plan. I'm sure many of those people have their own agenda. I agree that lofty goals are a good thing and it helps to energize people. There are many hours of hard work, I realize. I commend Michael Brown and the Ecology Action Center. I hope they continue their good work. But as good as the original plan is with their goals, I believe the references to ordinances are wrong. And so do the residents of District 2. Lastly, my hope is whatever outcome of this vote, we continue to work together to serve the citizens of the county. Some of our deliberations have become personal, and that should never be part of our discussions. We all argue to convince one another of our positions. We should never question the motive or actions of each other. I, for one, plan to work side by side with those who disagree with me and hope others will do the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments? Ms. Woolrab?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What we are fundamentally discussing here today is a plan for how we handle our solid waste. Our local landfill is closing, and the bottom line is that will mean our trash will be trucked longer distances at an increased cost to all. The original plan version lays out stretch goals for recycling. More recycling, less trucking, less expense. Let's aim high. A moment ago, I spoke of solid waste. We can euphemistically call it things like solid waste or trash or debris, but let's face it, folks, what we are talking about is garbage. Garbage is creating tremendous mounds on our central Illinois agricultural landscape. Sometimes it ends up in huge floating plastic islands in the oceans, and sometimes it poisons our soil and water. I am advocating for a robust plan to minimize garbage through education, more recycling, and recycling options. Am I? You bet I am. This community broadly supports recycling, and that support is witnessed by the positive comments on the original plan heard during the public comment period and the 2,300 petition signatures in its support. Community support for recycling is further witnessed here by the participation in and private donations of time and money to the hazardous household waste event held in September. At this event, thousands of households recycled thousands of pounds of waste and donated thousands of dollars in support of this event. Recycling support has also seen the success of curbside recycling in Bloomington, Normal, and several of the smaller surrounding communities. Yet, despite all the local support for recycling that I just mentioned, community recycling has leveled off. The original solid waste plan provides just one more option through ordinances and only in limited circumstances to reach community stretch goals as if all the other tools fail. With increased education and greater availability of recycling options, voluntary efforts may get us to the higher goals, but they may not. The vote today does not mandate individual household recycling. That is just plain disinformation that was spread by those who wish to weaken recycling goals. No one is proposing going through anyone's garbage bags. The original plan lays out a vision that will help reduce the cost of garbage disposal over the long term and prevent the central Illinois landscape from being dotted with garbage mounds.
Thank you. Further comments or questions or discussion? Mr. Wendt, do you have any comments?
Not at this time.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? Member Beard.
Thank you. I'm on the Land Use Committee. I will vote against this amendment and am supportive of the plan as passed by the Land Use Committee. All of those on the committee have spent plenty of time over the last couple of months reviewing this, talking to constituents, looking at similar plans. I just want to share some thoughts briefly on this and how I came to my vote. Is that the Land Use Committee fully supports the goals of the plan, the target set out in the plan, and the scope. The plan, as passed by the Land Use Committee, will continue stewardship and balancing the diversity that we have for anyone living in a rural area of the county to those living in downtown Bloomington or Normal. In my vote, and I think we are not questioning the experience or expertise of the EAC or the passion and time that went into this. Yeah. The plan, as first publicly presented, contained legislative tactics and remedies in an effort to meet those goals and targets. What we simply did was take out the recommendations for those tactics and those remedies. We did not fundamentally alter the plan. As has been said today, that these are a last-ditch effort. This would be a last-ditch thing. We did not fundamentally alter the plan. This plan, as first presented to a legislative body, contained legislative remedies. We took those out. I want, as a reminder too, and reiterating comments I said at the committee, Bloomington, Normal, and any community within McLean County has the ability to pass any ordinance they see fit. There is nothing that has prevented Bloomington, Normal, Bellflower, Downs, Towanda from passing over the last decade a recycling ordinance, a composting ordinance. We are also being agnostic on that in this plan, that if the residents of the community want to have a particular ordinance, they have that ability. We're not going to recommend that, but they have every ability to reach out to the EAC and say, here's what we want, help us design that. We're not preventing that. I also wanted to note that, and this also came out, that there will be efficiencies gained if an ordinance were to pass for multifamily, for commercial, down the road. There would be efficiencies gained in terms of cost, but at the end of the day, there would be a cost to residents of multifamily housing. That is a cost. Well, from one end, we're saying we don't want to raise taxes. We're in Illinois. There is a high tax burden. But to endorse an ordinance perspective would, and examples I see in the Midwest, anywhere from $2 to $10 a month, would be a cost that would be directly passed on to residents, to lower income residents of our community. While those of us who are maybe more affluent or choose to recycle at our own expense may make that choice. At the same time that we're hearing stories about affordability with housing in our community, to endorse a plan that also would exacerbate that, I cannot support. And again, all of these comments are not to say, and my desire to take out that language is not being against recycling or composting, or to not encourage residents to say recycling is important to me. I want to approach my landlord. I want to shop at businesses that have a more sustainable approach. It's simply not to mandate that through ordinances or not to use ordinances as a tactic to reach our goals. I have full confidence in the EAC and that we will be successful over these 20 years as technology and the environment change and continuing to be more sustainable. We simply took the language out. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments or questions? We're still in round one. Member Ovistelli.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to speak on the amended plan, which is the original plan. First, I want to say that I appreciate the divergent points of view. I understand that this item and these issues are ideologically charging. But I want to talk a little bit about from where my perspective on why I'm enthusiastically supporting this amendment. For me, the difference really is between a complete plan and an incomplete plan. I think we have a record on this board of doing our due diligence and not being afraid of a meritocracy of ideas, throwing things in. Some things we support more than others. For example, when we passed the mental health action plan, there were elements in there that I guess would be construed by some as unfunded mandates. I don't construe them as that because it was a plan. It included best practices. It assessed our needs. We actually very diligently broke ourselves up in that way. And that's exactly how this plan was developed. This plan was developed thinking about what our 20-year solid waste management needs could be, and then leaving those strategies and goals up to those units of government that are charged with actually responsibly implementing them. And so from where I sit today and what I've heard in the community, and there's been a lot of misinformation. For example, one bit of information is this notion that by supporting the plan, somehow we are supporting mandatory or forced recycling. And anybody who's read the plan, anybody who's looked at the details knows that that is not what is included in the plan. There is no call for mandatory or forced recycling. It is simply an option. It's an option that may or may not be necessary, depending on whether or not the voluntary measures that are included in the plan, the educational measures that are included in the plan, are successful. And that success is measured acutely by the unit of local government that is responsible for it. Not us, by them and their constituents. So my support for a complete plan is the reason that I am going to cast my vote for this, because I believe that's responsible governing. That's what it takes. You put forward a complete, comprehensive plan, and then you have to make the decisions that are, financially viable, politically feasible, those kinds of things when you're implementing. But we're having a conversation as if we're implementing this plan, and we're not. We are putting the plan forward. We have ambitious goals that are set in the plan. We have tactics and strategies and that are included in the plan. And now it will be up to the local unit of government as to whether or not they use them, and it will be up to the community about whether or not this becomes a reality. Exactly in the same way that the Mental Health Action Plan was put in place. That was an aspirational plan. That is a visionary plan. But nothing can happen in that unless we vote on it, unless we appropriate, unless we change something. And so I feel the same way about this plan, and I'm very proud of it. Thanks.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Member Johnson?
Thank you, Chairman. Wasn't planning on going so soon. I know that others want to weigh in. I just wanted to mention for those in the public and the media, I was on the Land Use Committee. I have extensive comments and input in the minutes, which would be in the packet, pages 29 to 41. And to directly, and I know that Member Robustelli was at the same meeting that I was, and in the minutes, it directly states here that I brought up us talking about how to get the right people on the bus to meet these goals. And I said, we talked about green business certification that is a statewide standard, and that we talked about expanding and looking at how we can go forward and make that more a part of the plan. And it says that, here it says, Mr. Brown said that this is not a high-ranking strategy, but is a part of the 6th strategy of a more increased educational outreach and hands-on facilitation. So my concern with this plan and how it relates to the Scritchlow amendments is that we talk about ordinances. Words matter. Words mean things. So if we're going to put ordinances and ordinance language in a plan, and those are going to be things that we possibly pursue, whether or not it's on the shelf or not, it's our priorities of what we're showing we want to lead with. And anyone who can read the minutes can see that we're not leading with getting the right people on the bus. The right people on the bus need to be small businesses and the people who are construction workers. I also pointed out in the amendment that many of the stakeholders that we talk about that need to be reached out to have not participated as much, to the point to where the McLean County Chamber of Commerce has released a letter saying that their members are concerned about the plan, the current plan as it was written, not the plan including the Scritchlow amendments. So my main overarching point here is that we need to have a plan that sets us up for success. No one is against recycling. No one is against, seeing people recycle more. People want us to be successful as a county, as municipalities, but we also have to make sure that we're not setting up a plan that is passing on costs to renters, to people who are already having trouble and struggling to afford their current rents. We need to make sure that the people that are going to be impacted by this plan are fully on board and know what's coming. Taking a 10,000-foot view of a plan, but not looking at the details. The problem is that the devil is in the details. And for this plan, with Mr. Scritchlow taking out the ordinances, the language about ordinances benefits us in the end, because it allows for us to actually have a plan that allows for us to be successful and not set us up for failure. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Member Rankin, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Always at the more people talk, the worse it is, I think, for the individual county board member, because then you have to go back and you have to answer what you've heard everybody else say. And I, like some of my fellow colleagues here, I welcome this conversation. I think it's good that we have a deliberative board that has differing ideas. I don't think that this is anything that we need to apologize for. And I think that, vociferous debate on issues like this are exactly what boards like this were created for, right? So this is a good thing rather than a bad thing. That being said, this, and I reiterate, I hate following Carlo ever, just because he's quite articulate. I'm the direct opposite of that. I'm more hammer rather than being finesse. So this plan was arrived at after approximately 1,500 hours worth of work and research, consensus building, all the meetings with staff and other stakeholders, over 100 stakeholders. One of the things that I would call into question that we just heard from Member Johnson, since I know he has his solid waste plan right in front of him, on page 26, he could turn and look at it, and under the policy focus group, there's a name. His name's Todd Lowry. Does anybody know where Todd Lowry works? Worked, right? It was with the Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber of Commerce was one of the stakeholders in the plan in and of itself. They were consulted. They were a part of it. So to suggest that somehow they weren't is a little bit of revisionist history. Second of all, what I would say is that after having these 1,500 hours, 100 stakeholders, almost 100% public comments that were positive, over 2,300 signatures submitted as a petition to support this. And then I hear multiple members support and say, we're not questioning the work of the EAC and Michael Brown. I commend Michael Brown. These are quotes that I wrote down. He was an expert, but we, the Land Use Committee, know better. That bothers me. It does, right? We support. We think he's great. He does all these things. He's the expert, but we know better. And I don't like even the use of them, and this isn't anything against Member Scritchlow. They're not the Scritchlow amendments. As soon as the Land Use Committee voted on them, they're the Land Use Committee amendments. This came from land use. This is not a one-man show. Member Scritchlow is a cool guy, but he's not the only person on that committee. What I would say, and the thing that I think has bothered me the most, while I will agree with everything that I've heard so far, this is a plan, this is not forced ordinances, this is not forced recycling, but please think of the hypocrisy of county board members that sit on a board that puts into place hundreds of ordinances. That's one of the very things that we do at this job. Unless you are brand new to this board, you yourself have voted on ordinances. Are ordinances forcing people to do things? Now, maybe your answer to that is yes. And maybe you haven't looked at the county code in any time. Do we force people to register their pets? Gosh, forced pet registration. How dare we? Force things are what ordinances do all the time. Now, you can determine whether you think they're good or not, but we have ordinances up and down the board on alcoholic beverages, on animals, on the emergency telephone system, fees, fireworks, food service, licensed businesses, parks, pollution control facilities, roads and highways, zoning, taxation, subdivisions of land, sewage disposal systems. I wait with bated breath for all of you that are so fearful of ordinances to make a motion to remove all of those from the county code. Ordinances, which this does not push, it certainly leaves it in the toolbox to need if we do, because ladies and gentlemen, that's what we're in the business of doing. We're in the business of doing the right things for our county. I believe this original plan, after thousands of hours worth of work and community input from experts, is the right thing to do, and if just in case you were wondering, I wholeheartedly support the original plan.
Thank you. Member Gordon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to reiterate a point that has been made earlier at least once. Decisions have to be made in terms of implementing this plan, government by government, issue by issue, case by case. The tools in the toolbox, if you will, the options made available are options that will be exercised only if there are majority votes of governing councils, governing boards, of government entities within McLean County. Those governing boards, as we listen to their constituents, and if there is opposition, as I know there is in various communities, those governing officials undoubtedly will listen to their constituents and may choose indeed not to follow the ordinance route if it is brought up as a possibility. Government by government is how this will be implemented. One criticism might be, well, that makes it a patchwork quilt. Exactly. We have local governments in place. We have a local government system that allows for that possibility. So the fact that ordinances are mentioned in the original version, which I will support, the fact that they are mentioned, first of all, they are not a frontline tool, and secondly, it will, and more important in my mind, it will come down to the will of the majority in any particular community, and that majority preference, or those preferences, will undoubtedly be reflected in the votes of the governing councils or governing boards of each individual government acting one at a time. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions at this time? Second round, Member Segoviano.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Second round. Just want to refer to Mr. Johnson's comment about this letter that we received from the Chamber of Commerce, and it was signed by John Walsh, who's Government Affairs and Public Affairs Manager. But in his letter, he says, while the Chamber cannot see or predict that these ordinances, which this is not an ordinance, it's a plan. So it's false information that he put out in this letter. It's a plan, not an ordinance, that eventually look like it. It is difficult to advocate for or against it. So they did not support or object to it, but they stated it's an ordinance, and it is not an ordinance, you know. Secondly, you know, we talk about will they or will they not. What I think every board member here ought to do at your leisure is take a drive down Market Street, Jefferson Street, Monroe Street, and see all the debris that's thrown out there on the curbside by construction people, by rental people, and it just piles up. And who pays for it? Every taxpayer in Bloomington pays to have that picked up, or the property owner takes their rent money to the bank. They get their profit, they get our taxes. I don't think it's right, and I think we ought to take a hard look at that, you know. Just like it's been alluded to that Farm Bureau supports this. I know Farm Bureau was approached about this issue and took no action on it. And finally, you know, I got a rather lengthy Gmail from a professor at Illinois State University. And it's really very interesting how they want to encourage, not only encourage, but instruct students the importance of recycling. In fact, she goes on to say in this lengthy thing that she contacted her county board member in support of this plan. She identifies him as Jacob Beard. that she contacted him and said she was in the support of this program. Her conclusion remarks is that, let's be honest, without a plan, the rental property owner will not offer recycling. They haven't yet, and they will not in the future unless pushed to do so. That would be up to the city of Bloomington, the town of Normal, even the county, to adopt an ordinance. This is only a plan. They may grumble for a while, and it will become commonplace, just as all communities throughout the country. So, you know, I would hope that we would adopt the original plan that was submitted by the Ecology Center and move this county forward.
Thank you. Further comments or questions? Member Beard, second round.
Yep. Hopefully brief here. I would just also like to add that I believe there is some sort of a disconnect between this plan as an ordinance and the expectation of a lot of the emails that we have received and the feedback that we have received. I believe people have a perception that as soon as this plan's adopted, next week, their apartment is going to have recycling, and that their, you know, the businesses are going to have some sort of a recycling mandate. I think we understand that that's not the case, and again, that's why I think the amendments were not a fundamental were not a rejection of the plan, or not a rejection of the work that's gone into it. It is changing the legislative tactic used to get to that. So I would just ask those that are following and those who are so passionate about this to know that if this does end up passing as the original draft that was presented, that people who are saying, yes, we've now got recycling for our apartments, that is not what's going to happen here, and that's what no one's voting on. So I got that expectation from a lot of, and that's the way this was being presented, and what kind of made a mountain out of what I perceive as a molehill. So.
Thank you very much. Other comments? Member Johnson, second round.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. Mr. Segoviano and Mr. Rankin brought up the McLean County Chamber of Commerce's involvement in this. I was never saying that they weren't consulted. I was never saying that they did not review things. I am just pointing out simply that a letter that was written January 15th, after many amounts of discussion in the community, has been generated, that they wrote a letter, and Mr. Segoviano did point out one part in one sentence of the letter, but in the third paragraph, first sentence, however, Mr. John Walsh writes, I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge and address the concerns coming from the business community. And that was what my previous statements were all about, that we want to get the right people on the bus, we want to be successful, we want to have a successful plan, but when we are told in subcommittee that is a sixth strategy to get more businesses educated on recycle, and I point out that that needs to be a higher priority in the plan, and then we have the McLean County Chamber of Commerce stepping forward, saying that there are concerns in the business community about this. Obviously, there has not been a connection with the plan to the business community, who, which, or by ordinances would impact the most.
Other comments or questions? Member Barnett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm going to support this amendment. I mean, I seconded it. Hopefully that's obvious to the board, everyone that's here. You know, I'm not doing anything. I could, but I'm not going to. You know, the compelling case for me, why should we support this original plan that was brought forward by the Ecology Action Center, free of any amendments that have been offered, is simply this: the tremendous amount of public input and stakeholder involvement from a very diverse base within the community. I'm going to take just a moment and read through this, and I know board members have already read this, but this is just more for the general knowledge. So stakeholders have included Illinois State University Sustainability Office, Henson Disposal, Illinois State University Environmental Health, Heartland Community College's Green Institute, the Illinois Wesleyan Environmental Studies Group, State Farm Insurance Corporation, the Ecology Action Center, the West Bloomington Revitalization Partnership, Home Sweet Home Ministries, Peoria Disposal Company, McLean County Administration, Henson Disposal, City of Bloomington, the McLean County Chamber of Commerce, the Great Plains Laborers District Council, the ISU Student Environmental Action Coalition, the McLean County Regional Planning Commission, Illinois Wesleyan University, Republic Services and Allied Waste, the Town of Normal, the McLean County Health Department, the Economic Development Council, the Bloomington Normal Water Retention District, Midwest Fiber, the Edge Apartment Complex, Young America, the Student Environmental Action Coalition, and College Democrats, Walk to Class Housing Group, Eastland Mall, Uptown Partners, which is the Uptown Normal Business Association, the Downtown Bloomington Business Association, again, the McLean County Chamber of Commerce, the Monroe Center, which is a prominent business building in downtown Bloomington, District 87 Schools, Hy-Vee, Jewel Osco on College Avenue, and Avanti's. Those are just a few of the stakeholders that were consulted and came together to put this plan together. This is not some plan that has been constructed by the far left, ultra-liberal, environmentally Greenpeace group of our community. This is a diverse plan that has been built with stakeholders in the environmental area, also within business and within diverse leadership of this county. They have come together and worked diligently for hours and hours and hours, provided public input for a couple thousand people on this particular issue. And because of the amount of time that has been put in, the diverse stakeholders have been brought together, and the final piece they've developed, I think it is worthy of our support. Now, if the opposing group on this board had come forward with a plan that had the same amount of stakeholder input, the same amount of public input, I think maybe that would give us pause and consideration to consider what they have to say. But they have not done that, not to the level that this plan has been constructed, and that's why it has my full support. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Barnett. Are there other comments or questions at this time? Member Casely.
This item that we have on our agenda is a plan. It sets goals. It represents the aspirations of our community for the future of McLean County. What do we aspire to? Do we aspire to just leave things the way they are, or do we aspire to have a better community? And we all think that we inherited a really great county, but we have had our troubles in terms of environmental problems. We had a manufactured gas works in Bloomington, and they buried coal tar, and we spent thousands of dollars that were raised through our gas bills to remove the harmful carcinogenic coal tar that was on the southwest corner of the city of Bloomington. And we ourselves in the county have had environmental problems. We had a county highway near Stanford out in Allen Township that had an encroachment of a service station tank for gasoline that was leaking. And who do you suppose the Attorney General and the Environmental Protection Agency came after? It wasn't the dissolved corporation that owned the gas station. They came after McLean County. So we have inherited some things that were not so good. And so we have an interest, an aspiration to do a better job in the future. And I think the original plan addresses that. We have, it is a plan, or it may be implemented by ordinances. It does not require that it be implemented by ordinances. And the adoption of an ordinance by the county would not have any effect on anybody that lived in an incorporated town or village or city. And we do have 16 villages in McLean County, each of which would have the power to adopt ordinances. We have 4 cities in McLean County. that have the power to adopt ordinances. We have one town and one county, and each of them have a right to weigh in with respect to their specific territories with regard to ordinances. And each of them might have totally different views as to whether an ordinance was required in the first place and what a recycling ordinance should contain. And so this does not call for the adoption of ordinances. It mentions that as one of the remedies that is available. And so I think that it is time to talk about specific things that would be required with respect to landlords or with respect to people who demolish buildings or whatever. Each municipality and the county itself would have an opportunity to consider arguments pro and con with respect to specific problems that exist. And so I favor the plan that is being put forward, and I hope that the board will adopt it, and I hope that we'll have peace and tranquility, and that we'll leave it up to each of the other players in this to determine whether they think an ordinance is required and what that ordinance should be. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It always bothers me when I read the minutes of a meeting and I know I heard something at a meeting said, but it's not reflected in the minutes. And when I read the minutes of the Land Use Development Committee meeting, I had noticed something that Michael Brown had said was not in those minutes. And so I contacted Don Knapp and I asked him how I could listen to that meeting again. And he told me, and then I asked Ryan to listen to him. And at the January 4th meeting, about 1 hour in and 1 minute, and it's not reflected in the minutes, Michael Brown testified before the Land Use Development Committee that if the mandatory ordinance language stays in the plan, then he is free to lobby local governments to pass the plan. But if the mandatory language is taken out of the plan, he is not free to lobby local governments to pass the plan. So, you know, that kind of always bothered me because I always thought, well, why do we need, the Ecology Action Center does receive government funds, why do we need a government-paid lobbyist to lobby for a plan? And so I always felt that the better approach was that that we take the mandatory language out of the plan, we eliminate the taxpayer-paid lobbyist to lobby for a mandatory ordinance, and as member Casely just suggested, 10 years from now, if the facts on the ground warrant such an ordinance, let the facts on the ground and the mood of the electorate determine the need for an ordinance then. But don't club some poor elected official 10 years from now, because we don't know who's going to be on this county board 10 years from now, except possibly Paul Segoviano.
Jealousy will get you nowhere.
We don't know. And I can hear what's going to be said to that board member. It's in the plan. It's in the plan. It's in the plan. Look at the stakeholders. The experts said you have to do this. You know, it just seems to me, let the facts on the ground then determine that's what we should do. So I believe that's what Member Scritchlow was trying to achieve in this. I do remember when he asked me, he goes, should I keep pursuing this? And I said, I mean, you always know what I'm going to say. If you believe in it, you fight for it. You got to fight for what you believe in. I mean, if you're not going to fight for what you believe in, then what are you doing here? I mean, you know, and so, but I said, be prepared if you're going to keep going forward that you might lose. Can I go on?
Yes, please
okay.
do.
And so I said to fight for it. I commend his efforts. I know we say around here people should vote their conscience. He argued for his conscience, and I know he did the best he could. It may turn out that some of us may end up losing the battle, but I feel that we have kicked enough sleeping giants awake that we may end up winning the war. So thank you.
Okay, we're getting to the end of our debate here. Member Gordon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to take respectful exception to the characterization that Mr. Erickson just used of Michael Brown. Michael Brown is the County of Mclean Solid Waste Coordinator, as I understand it. The ordinance language remaining in would permit Mr. Brown to broach the subject with any official of any particular unit of government. That doesn't make him a paid lobbyist. He is the county's solid waste coordinator. We've heard a lot of expressions of confidence in him, confidence that I share deeply in his abilities and in his judgments about the needs regarding recycling and solid waste management generally in McLean County. As the county's solid waste coordinator, I don't think we should be tying his hands. And the amendment moved by Member Segoviano, seconded by Member Barnett, would keep appropriate language in the proposed 20-year solid waste management master plan that wouldn't tie the hands of the county solid waste coordinator.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Mr. Wendt, do you have anything that you would like to add?
The only thing I have to add, yes, I do have one thing to add. I think that Mr. Brown stated that if we strip the ordinance this way, that he would have to reduce his goal. So I think they're really relying on putting these ordinances in, if that's correct. And I would like to see this done voluntarily instead of forcing us to put ordinances in to meet their goals. If that's correct, that the goals were to be reduced if we strip that language, I find that they're going to depend on getting these ordinances in. So I know out in the county and my district would be, my constituents would be pretty much against that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wendt. Are there any comments, any further comments or not? If none, then we will call for the question without any objection. Let me clarify, a yes vote would be, excuse me.
You have a substitute motion, yes, which means that you're voting on the substitute motion. Doesn't mean it's approval of that. It means that it will then replace the original motion. You'll have to vote on that again. I just want to make sure that people understand what it is that they're voting for. Yes, because it's not done as an amendment. It was done as a substitute motion, which means if you're approving that, Board Member Segoviano's motion, then that replaces the original, and then that is there, and you're able to debate that all over again if you want. But then you would have to vote on it again.
Okay. Thank you. Does everybody understand? We're voting on Member Segoviano's substitute motion, which is to return to the original plan as presented to the Land Use Committee by the Ecology Action Center at this time. And a yes vote would be in favor of that. Are there any questions? Make sure it's clarified. A no vote would be then to return to the plan as presented by the Land Use Committee, which was an amendment to the Ecology Action Plan as originally presented to that committee. Is everyone okay with that? And as I understand it, we're going to have to take two votes on that. So we'll do that at this time. I think probably because of the amount of debate, we should have a roll call vote. So the clerk, please call the roll.
Point of information.
Yes, sir.
Will you be voting on this issue?
I will be voting in case of a tie.
Thank you.
William Casely. Yes. Chuck Erickson. No. George Gordon.
Yes.
Mark Johnson.
No.
Randall Martin.
No.
Catherine Metzger.
Yes.
Scott Murphy.
No.
Eric Rankin.
Yes.
Carlo Robustelli.
Yes.
Susan Schaefer. Yes. Ryan Scritchlow.
No.
Paul Segabiano. Yes. David Seltzer. Yes. James Solner. No. George Wendt.
No.
Lori Wolrab.
Yes.
Josh Barnett.
Yes.
Jacob Beard.
No.
8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, what, 10 to 8? 10 to 8.
There were 10 yes votes and 8 no votes. The motion is carried. Now we need to re-vote to replace with the substitute motion. Hang on, we're going to vote now to replace the substitute motion and strike the original motion.
Point of clarification, Mr. Chairman. I believe, and Mr. Chambers helped me out here, I believe that what we just voted on was to bring to the floor the original version that was presented to the Land Use and Development Committee, and now that's what's under discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Parliamentarian. So bring it to the floor.
Thank you.
So we did approve it now, and it is on the floor before you, and we will re-vote on that motion as presented, substitute motion, again by Member Segoviano. Thank you, sir. So we will again take a voice vote. Is there any question? You're voting on the same thing. Okay. Roll call vote.
William Casely. Yes. Chuck Erickson.
You are. We are voting on Member Segoviano's substitute. No. It's been approved. The original plan is submitted to the committee by the Ecology Action Center, which I find somewhat ridiculous, but anyway, we are going to do that anyway by parliamentary procedures as recommended by our staff and legal counsel. Does everybody understand? Okay.
Without the Scritchlow amendment.
The original plan as presented to the Land Use Committee by the Ecology Action Center without the amendments that were passed by the Land Use Committee as recommended by Mr. Scritchlow in the beginning. Thank you. Okay, we will now take a vote.
Okay, we have Mr. Casely's vote, so Chuck Erickson. I'm sorry.
You're no.
Okay. I have Mr. Casely's vote.
You're
So
okay.
Chuck Erickson, you're a no. George Gordon?
Yes.
Mark Johnson?
No.
Randall Martin?
No.
Catherine Metzger?
Yes.
Scott Murphy?
No.
Eric Rankin?
Yes.
Carla Robustelli?
Yes.
Susan Schaefer?
Yes.
Ryan Scritchlow?
No.
Paul Segabiano?
Yes.
David Seltzer?
Yes.
James Solner? George Wendt?
No.
Lori Wolrab?
Yes.
Josh Barnett?
Yes.
Jacob Beard?
The result is the same as the last vote, 10 yeses and 8 noes. And the original plan has carried. Is everybody clarified on that? We will move on at this time. Member Erickson, do you have any further
Yeah, the Land Use and
information?
Development Committee has no other items to be presented for information, and our general report can be found on pages 29, 35, and 36 through 41. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. We'll move to the Transportation Committee. Chair Member Casely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We bring no items for action from the Transportation Committee, and our general report can be found on pages 25 through 28 of the unapproved minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Property Committee Chair report, Member Segoviano.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Property Committee brings no items for action this morning, and our general report can be found on pages 36 to 41, and I would answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. We're going on the report of the County Administrator, Mr. Wasson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have nothing for the board this morning. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. We'll move on to other business and communication. At this time, Member Solner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I plan to convene the Rules Subcommittee in the next few weeks. We have some items to discuss. If any member has any additional items, either changes or additions to the county board rules, please contact me or administration or attend that meeting when it's called. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have bills to pay. These bills have been reviewed and recommended for payment by our auditor and our treasurer in the amount of $3,430,743.03. Is there a motion to approve? Motion by member Gordon, second by member Casely. Comments or questions? If none, all in favor of paying the bills as presented, please say aye. Opposed? The motion has carried. And this meeting is adjourned.
Adjourned, George.